Welcome back to the Cumbie Show. We tell like it is and we don't care how you feel. And today we got a great one, ladies and gentlemen. The SEC Championship, Georgia versus Alabama. And I think this is going to be a fantastic, great game to watch. Much anticipated. Up there in Atlanta, a battle of the Titans, battle of the big boys in this SEC Championship game. I think a lot of us counted Alabama out a little too soon in the beginning of the season after that loss to Texas, and then especially after that very poor play against USF. I mean, a lot of Alabama's earlier games looked rough. I mean, you could easily see them going 9-3 the way that they played in the beginning of the season, but they bounced back, and they're looking a lot better as the season goes on. And also, we know how Georgia has looked throughout the season. But UGA is sitting at, Georgia is sitting at a 6-point favorite. The over-under, depending on where you look. Now, this can change as the week goes on. I am recording this on a Tuesday, like noon, 1 o'clock. But Georgia is sitting at a 6-point favorite. 54, the over-under is around 54.5 points. So that's kind of putting the game at like a 30-24 type score for Georgia. Honestly, seems very realistic in my opinion. When I saw the 6 points, I thought, is that a little too much for Georgia? But I don't think it is. And you know how do I come out and say, I am going to take Georgia to win this game. To cover, I am not so sure about. I am still trying to decide if I think Georgia will cover the 6 points or not. I think they can cover, though. I think they can get it done. And multiple reasons why. We like to jump right into it. Alabama is coming off a very poor game against Auburn with a literally last-second Hail Mary to the end zone. And then Georgia is coming off a rather lackluster, just not great performance against Georgia Tech. Both teams did win their rival game. And so what can these teams do to bounce back this week in one of the biggest games of the season? And I don't think this game, obviously, this game is talked about a lot, and it's going to be one of the most anticipated, most talked about games of the week. But there's a lot riding on this game for both teams. If Georgia wins, they get in the playoff, and they're probably going to stay the number one seed, and Alabama is done for. Whatever bowl game they go to, they go to. But if Georgia wins, they're in the playoffs, probably number one seed. Alabama is out. They'll be playing in a bowl game. Now, if Alabama wins and Georgia loses, I think Georgia is out of the playoffs, and I'm still not 100% sure if Alabama gets into the playoffs. I think they still need a couple things go their way because of every team ahead of them, obviously besides Oregon and Washington, to those two teams have to play against each other. I think if every team ahead of them wins out, I think Alabama still gets left out. If Michigan goes undefeated when they play Iowa, they're getting in the playoff. If Texas wins out, they have that win over Alabama, they're getting in the playoffs. That's 2 spots. I do believe that if FSU beats Louisville, they're getting in the playoff. And I do think that the winner of Oregon and Washington, which I believe it's Oregon, I do think that they get in the playoff. That's 4 spots. And I think Alabama could be sitting at home, sitting outside of the 4-team playoff, even with a win in Atlanta against Georgia. I personally wouldn't agree to that, but I'm also not on the committee. It is what it is. But like I said, I'm taking Georgia to win this game, and I am going to convince myself to take Georgia to cover. And I wrote down, I got a bunch of notes here, so let's kind of go through it that lead me into believing that. I kind of want to jump into the keys of the game right away as well, and then talk about each one as why I'm taking Georgia. I think the keys of the game for Georgia is what starters are going to play. Last week, Georgia had a ton of starters out. Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, Rara Thomas, Tate Ratledge, bunch of guys on defense. I mean, left and right, Georgia had a lot of players out. Now, I think a lot of that was just resting these players to get them ready for this game. If these players come back, which I'm fairly certain Brock Bowers will be out there. I'm very certain Tate Ratledge will be out there. I don't believe Rara Thomas is going to play. That's just my opinion. And I do think that it's probably 50-50 for Ladd McConkey, but given the circumstances and how big this game is, I do think Ladd McConkey will play. Whether he's 100% healthy, I think we will see him in the game. If we can have these starters playing, I think it is going to be a very uphill battle, tough sled for Bama to stop all the weapons that Georgia has. Another key to this game for Georgia is, can they stop the run game from Milroe? Now, I'm not talking about this Alabama run game. I'm talking about Milroe using his legs specifically. Now, yes, you do want to stop Alabama's run game in general, but I think one of the keys to this game for Georgia is, can they stop Milroe from using his legs? Force him into a position where he has to make plays through there. Now, he can make plays through there if we've seen it, but this has been one of Georgia's weaknesses throughout the year, throughout the season, and for quite some time that I can remember. The 3 games that Georgia struggled the most against was the Auburn game earlier in the season, where their quarterback was able to get some really good positive yards on the run with his legs. The Mizzou game, same situation with their quarterback. Georgia Tech, same situation with Haynes King, where Haynes King didn't light up the scoreboard, but he was able to effectively use his legs when needed, and they got 2 touchdowns out of Haynes King. So can Georgia limit this run game from Milroe? I think in the Alabama LSU, didn't Milroe have like 4 rushing touchdowns, some crazy number, something around there. I think that is going to be a huge factor in this game. If Georgia has their starters playing and can limit Milroe on the run game, I think Georgia has a very good chance at winning this game and it not being close. And my third key to the game for Georgia is, can this offense play the way that it played against Ole Miss and Tennessee and some of the other games this season? Because with that being said, there's a lot of statistics that I went through. I think 2 of Georgia's biggest weaknesses, it comes both on their defense. It is their red zone defense and a quarterback that can use their legs. And those seem to hurt Georgia the most. All season long, we've seen that teams that get in the red zone on Georgia score a touchdown 9 times out of 10. And teams that can effectively use the quarterback with the run game have given Georgia the most trouble and kept the games the closest. And I think with the talent that Alabama has on its roster, if they can use Milroe in that way, there's a good chance that Alabama can win this game. Now, if Georgia is able to slow or stop Milroe on the run game, I think that this game not get ugly, but I think Georgia could win this game by 2 scores. Maybe by like 10. So I think that is the keys for Georgia. I think the keys for Alabama for this game is basically the opposite of that. Can they get Milroe going in the run game? Can they effectively pass the ball and design quarterback runs where Milroe can get out in space and get behind this defense? I think they're also going to have to find a way to get to Carson Beck. Carson Beck hasn't been touched all season long, and I have the numbers here. Carson Beck has been sacked 10 times all season long. Alabama has allowed 39 sacks. 39. That's a shit ton. That leads me into my other key to the game for both of these guys is, can Georgia get Milroe? And also, the more important part, can Alabama's offensive line play well this game? Can they protect Milroe? Can they get enough time against this Georgia defense? And we know how elite this Georgia defense is. Can they allow enough time for Milroe to pass and not break down in coverage or even give space to Milroe to run? Because I think that is going to be a huge factor. If this Georgia defense gets a few sacks on Milroe and he starts to feel the pressure and he's forced into making throws that he shouldn't be making, and I think that's where you could see Georgia start to pull away later in this game. Because going through the numbers, the defenses for each team are relatively close in nature. Scoring defense, Georgia is number 6 in the nation, and then Alabama is number 14. So for the most part, both of these teams are keeping the opposing team to lower scoring games. I think the worst one for Alabama was the LSU game, but LSU puts up hundreds of points on everybody. I can't remember the team that scored the most on Georgia. Would it be Auburn? I can't, now I'm blanking. Might have been Georgia Tech. But nonetheless, going through the offense, this is where I think Georgia, for the most part, when it comes to roster-wise and the way that they've been playing throughout the season, I think this is where Georgia is a lot better. In almost every category, Georgia is better. Total points per game, Georgia's sitting at 39.6 to compare to Alabama's 35.6. Total points all season long, Georgia has a total of 475. Alabama has a total of 427. Total touchdowns all season long, Georgia has 59. Alabama has 53. So when it comes to scoring points and getting touchdowns, Georgia outmatches Alabama in every category. Third down efficiency on both offense and defense, Georgia is number one. They are converting 55.8% of their third down on offense, where Alabama's converting 48.7% of their offense on third down. Passing total, Georgia's sitting at 3,730 yards on the season. Alabama, 2,778 on the season. Here's one thing that Alabama is, by a very small margin, but still, their average passing yards per attempt per completion, they're sitting at 10 versus Georgia's at 9.3. So they're passing almost a full yard better than Georgia per completion. Passing yards per game, Georgia's sitting at 310. Alabama's sitting at 231. So a significant difference there. Passing touchdowns. Georgia has 25 to Alabama's 21. And I already talked about the sacks allowed. Georgia has only allowed 10 sacks all season long. That's less than one a game, where Alabama has allowed 39. That is not a good number. Alabama has got to see that improve if they want any chance in this game. Going towards the rushing end, rushing yards, Georgia 2,227 compared to Alabama's 2,131. So Georgia has about 100 more, just less than 100 more rushing yards than Bama. They are rushing the ball better than Bama as well, per average 5.3 compared to Alabama's 4.5. Rushing yards per game, Georgia's rushing it for an average of 185.6 yards a game. Alabama is sitting at 177. So those are fairly close. And then rushing touchdowns, Georgia has 32. Alabama has 29 rushing touchdowns, with a lot of those also coming from Milroe. Penalties. Now, Alabama, for these past few years, 2 to 3 years, Alabama has been uncharacteristically, I cannot pronounce that word. Ooh, don't even try again, Stephen. Discipline has not been Bama's strong suit these past few years. They have been one of the more penalized teams in the SEC, in fact, in the nation when it comes to penalties. And this year's not really any different. They are sitting at 72 total penalties this year. Georgia's sitting at 52. So Alabama has 20 more penalties this season than Georgia. And Georgia's last game, those numbers went up significantly. That was one of the most penalized Georgia teams I have ever seen. They had 6 penalties on the game against Georgia Tech. I talked about it in my recap of how awful those refs were. ACC refs are the worst refs in college football. You cannot change my mind. But that's also a recipe for disaster for Alabama. This Georgia team is a team that you cannot shoot your foot in. They live, breathe, and die when it comes to second and long, third and medium. They will get after you on defense. And if you give this Georgia offense any extra downs, any extra set of downs, if it becomes 3rd and 8 and you commit a penalty and this Georgia offense picks up an automatic first down because of your mistake, they will make you pay. They are one of the best in the country at doing that. So that's not a good category for Bama. Total yards altogether, rushing and passing for the season, Georgia's sitting at 5,957. Alabama's sitting at 4,909. So Georgia has over 1,000 more than Georgia total. Per game, they are sitting at, Georgia's sitting at 596.4 yards per game, and then Alabama's sitting at 409.1. So those are the kind of numbers just to go through them very quickly, those are the numbers when looking at the team stats that Georgia and Alabama have done all season long. Now, this is who they are. These are who these teams are. We played a full regular season. We've got full 12 games. What you see on the field is what you're going to get. This is them. And I think with the way that Georgia is able to spread the ball out, use as many targets and weapons that they have, and the fact that Carson Beck never seems to be rattled, even under pressure, this defense is still playing lights out this game. I think that Georgia is going to win this game, and I think that they are going to cover. Another statistic that I wanted to bring up when looking at the percentage for Alabama and their offense. I think Alabama heavily relies on a very few handful of people. Jalen Milroe's run game and 2 receivers in Burton and Isaiah Bond. 46% of Alabama's completed passes. So for every pass that they completed, 46% of those go to 2 people. That's Burton and Bond. So almost half of their completed pass go towards, or basically 2 individuals on the team. Georgia's top 2 receivers on their game, so the guys that have caught the most balls, the top 2 for Georgia are Brock Bowers and Dominic Lovett. They only make up 32% of the completion percentage. And you can kind of do the same thing with the run game. Georgia really loves to spread this ball out to everyone. And that's why I said one of the biggest factors for Georgia is, can they get these guys back and healthy? And I think that also leads me to believe that I do think that Georgia will win this game and they will cover the 6 points. I'm thinking it's like a 2-score. Georgia wins by 10 to 13 points, pulling away in the 4th quarter. Now, like I said, I'm not saying that there's no chance that Alabama can't win. I think if they can effectively use Milroe in the run game, he does not create turnovers and mistakes through the air and is able to deliver the passes when he needs to and take the long shots. I still think that this Georgia team is a team that you have got to hit long shots when they're there. You don't have to hit 40 a game, but when they're there, you've got to take them. And I think that Milroe can do that. Now, if they can do that, I think Alabama has a good chance at actually winning this game. But if, like I said, if Georgia can stop Milroe, you're coming in you're coming in wobbly, one leg, broken arm. Like, it would not be a good day to fight, if that makes sense. So, nonetheless, I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I think there's a lot riding on this game for both. I think it's win or you're out. Win or go home. At least for Georgia. I don't think Alabama gets into the playoff. Even if they win, I think they still need a couple things to go their way. And then if they win, I think they're in. But nonetheless, it's going to be a great game. I'm excited. Georgia to win. Georgia to cover the 6.5 points. Go Dogs. Fuck you, Alabama. Over and out.